Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your decidedly not number one Minnesota Vikings. In case you haven't tuned in a while, in case you might have just like gone to Mars since October and come back, we are not number one, it turns out. Or number two, either. I am your host with the most here, Dusty O'Connell. Joining me is customarily useful human and Vikings blogger extraordinaire, Arif Hassan. How you doing, Arif?
I'm all right, I guess. That didn't sound enthusiastic. I'm great.
That's good. How's your holiday? Have a good Christmas?
Yeah, man. Vermont's tight. I love it. My brother always has these great plans for what we do on Christmas. So yeah, no, it's been great.
What was your favorite gift that you received?
Love.
Oh,
no,
that's actually what you gave. You gave a very sweet gift to your brother, and so Arif, it turns out, is one of those people who gives to charities in other people's names for Christmas. But when he does that, he picks really great charities. So kudos to you for that. But I guess
I try not to do it too often because I feel like people who are expecting a thing get that, and then they can't you cannot complain about that gift, right? But if you want something, you feel kind of bummed out, but you don't feel right for not feeling that. So I don't want to put people in an awkward situation. But Rashad and Abbott are doing really well. So I didn't think that they expected a thing or needed a thing. And the things that we got them the last couple of Christmases were really nice. And I think they've kind of got a complete set of what they want in their kitchen and all that. So in this case, I picked something that had a lot to do with Rashad's life circumstances growing up, and it's a charity that helps resolve some of those things. So I felt really happy about that.
As you should. That was a sweet thing for you to do. But you must have gotten something that appealed to you more than
he knows
most.
I'm really into shoes. He got me a great pair of shoes. I really like them. They're this electric blue with blue laces and stuff.
Ooh.
Yeah. Beyond that, he just gave me a lot of food, which I love.
That sounds like a satisfactory Christmas. Lots of cured meat type things, preserved goodies, or stuff that you actually have to put some work into to get you a King Arthur flour baking kit or something.
Oh, that would have been cool too. No, he got me some really nice cookie crackers. But he also got
cookie crackers.
Those cookies that are in between cookies and crackers.
You can't just have a cookie or a cracker. Why does food have to be two things? Why can't things just be one thing?
I don't know. It's tough, but
they're good.
I don't know. You mix drinks, so that happens all the time. But
it's still one drink. I don't try to turn my drink into a dessert. It's not like a martini taco.
Yeah, sure. There's no dessert shots. Good point.
That's not what I.
No, but then he also gave me this really nice specialty balsamic vinegar and olive oil, which is this local olive oil produced in Vermont, which sounds dubious. I don't think that they can grow olive trees in Vermont, but I'm not going to argue with the packaging. So it's, I don't know, it's really cool, man. We don't have artisanal balsamic, but we're totally the kind of douchebags that really appreciate artisanal balsamic, artisanal olive oil. So I'm super happy.
Your caprese have been elevated for the foreseeable future.
What did you get? How was your Christmas?
It was really good. It was really mellow. We were trapped indoors on Christmas Day. Even though it was 55 degrees outside, the wind was generally at or above the temperature. It was very like North Dakotan / North Minnesotan, except we didn't have the brutal cold and snow that went with it. It was just psycho windy all day. So we just hid indoors, opening presents. I didn't get a whole lot, but I got a couple of excellent gifts. My brother sent me a new hockey sweater all the way from Grand Forks, North Dakota. So now I finally have a University of North Dakota hockey sweater, as one should.
Is it the Sioux, the Nothing, or the Fightin' Hawks?
The North Dakota Nothing.
All right, that's probably the best one.
Yeah, I was so ambivalent. Like for all the years that I like grew up in Grand Forks, being sensitive to the nickname issue and stuff, I was like, this isn't gonna last forever. I don't know if I want like it'd be like having a Redskins jersey in like 5 years or 10 years or whatever. Do you want to really be the guy that's like, yeah, I don't really, but it was a different time. Like that's this transcends that whole argument, and is a really sweet gift. Fits me perfectly. So thanks, Logan. You're the best. The other thing that I got that I guess has been like a surprise, it's one of those gifts. It's not quite like when you're expecting something and you open like a donation in your name to a place, but like it's like socks. You open it, and you're like, oh, socks. I got a wooden comb for Christmas.
Oh, like really cool, or?
Well, yeah. And I at first I was just like, oh, a comb, cool. Having used it for like 3 days, I have to recommend a sturdy wooden comb to every man I know, and probably even woman that has hair.
That is not a direction I expected it to go in. All right.
No, it wasn't the direction I expected either. I was just like, oh, whatever, a comb. But then I like combed my hair with it a couple of times, and it's phenomenal. I mean, like my hair is pretty easy to style. I basically like my hair looks like Bob Costas's toupee, and I just, have to run a comb through it. And like, I used to have just like, crappy plastic travel comb or whatever.
Yeah, a comb.
Yeah. Just, your average bathroom comb. But this guy, like, less static. It doesn't scratch my head as much. It's like gentler. It just seems like it works better. Like I can use less water and my hair like settles down into like a better style, like the best expression of its style in just like half as many strokes. It's amazing.
Happy for you.
So, no specific like brand recommendation because no one's given us any money for this. But if you've got hair, you should be combing it with a wooden comb. And that's
so that doesn't impact me at all, actually.
Well, actually, I've heard there are companies that make wooden beard combs. I don't know if all beard combs are made of wood. If that's like a new thing for top head hair, but. But as a beard enthusiast, I would recommend looking into a wooden beard comb. I think you might find it quite manageable.
I'll look into it. On to the show.
Yeah, so I mentioned that whatever company made my comb isn't giving us any money, but the listeners of this show certainly do, and we really appreciate it whenever they do. Another year of the Vikings seasons is now in the books with regrettably no championship. But that's okay because Norse Code will be here to get your hopes up when things look like they're going to be great, and then to sit next to you and give you a side hug when things end up not so great. And that is 100% due to contributions from, like I said, you, the listeners. And if you would like to join the ever-growing pantheon of people who we actually look to as gods, I think pantheon is the best word, you can do so by making a one-time contribution at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can become a recurring monthly sponsor by going to patreon.com/NorseCode and contributing any amount you would like, although we suggest about $3.50 once a month every month. Just skip that grande latte, not even a venti latte. That's how little it costs to support the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I mean, it costs nothing, but we would appreciate it if you would go above and beyond nothing and contribute about $3.50 to the cause. So, I guess we won't have much to talk about after this week other than breaking down a pointless game, which will have no implications on next season because we'll have no idea what the team will even really look like. So,
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, like the minutia is ultimately pretty pointless, right? But I think, at this point we're not checked out so much as we're not interested in what things mean for this season. But in terms of taking a look at what this game might mean, going forward, going into the next season, there's a reason to talk about it. But we've already got our own thing that's independent of the game now. I mean, it's become its own thing independent of the game. So looking forward, there's already a lot of stuff to talk about. We can talk about the game in a little bit about what it means going forward and what decisions the Vikings will have to make and stuff like that. But the end of the season has ended horribly because not because the Vikings didn't make the playoffs. That sucks. But because the Vikings are drama filled again.
I know so before we talk Vikings, who should we cheer for in the postseason? I think I know your answer. I think we're on the same page as far as this goes.
Actually, I haven't been thinking about this too much. I'm a closet Seahawks fan, so there's that. Obviously, next week before the playoffs, we're cheering for Detroit. Not just because they'll beat Green Bay, because if they win, I think they kick Green Bay entirely out of the playoffs. Always cheer against the Giants because Eli Manning is a big dumb face. Cheer against the Cowboys because, it's the Cowboys. Not huge. I mean, I like Dak Prescott. I like Ezekiel Elliott. I like a lot of individual members of the Cowboys, but cheer against the Cowboys because of the Cowboys. So I don't really have no particular attachment to the NFC South. I guess I could see the Falcons doing well. Still got the sting from the 1998 game. So on the NFC side of things, maybe the Seahawks, who have been whatever, right? On the AFC side of things, I've got even less of what's happening on the AFC side of things.
I mean, the Patriots are going to roll, as they do.
Yeah, they're less effective without Gronk. But yeah, I think the Patriots are still the favorite. Was it because it's Oakland coming out of the AFC West? Maybe the Chiefs, right? Because the Broncos are probably out of it.
Yeah, Broncos are out. I think it's probably Patriots or Chiefs at this point, and I really have no desire to cheer for either of those teams.
Right. And with the Raiders are going to have Matt McGloin for the playoffs, right?
Yep.
So that's a thing that's happening.
Not a good
the
one.
other Ginger Rocket. What's happening in the AFC North? The Steelers have won the AFC North, right? There's no chance the Steelers. Or is it the Ravens? Oh, man. I have no idea what's going on in football. I've checked out.
I think the Steelers are locked in, yeah.
Okay, well, the Ravens will probably make a wild card. I don't want Joe Flacco to do well again. I feel like, for the sake of my professional pride, I'm cheering against Joe Flacco. And the Colts. I'm cheering against the Colts. I don't even know if they'll make the playoffs. I think they're the favorites right now. I think they're winning the division, but I think there's another game that could change that. Don't know. And so I want the Colts to lose, if only because I have staked a very strong claim on an Andrew Luck hill. And the worse the Colts do, the better my hill looks.
Yeah, I want all those teams to lose too. And I mean, by default,
leave us many teams.
I was going to go Seahawks and Dolphins, but then I realized we can't cheer for the Dolphins because we have two of their draft picks. So we need them to lose right away. So I guess Seattle all the way.
Some of our listeners hate that. Some of our listeners really dislike Seattle. And I understand that. There's no reason to be more attached to Seattle.
I get it too, and I'm not very confident they're going to win the Super Bowl. I mean, it's going to be probably pretty annoying.
What a lackluster Super Bowl this is going to turn out to be.
Well, it could be. As much as I hate to say it, I think a Cowboys-Patriots Super Bowl would be pretty exciting. Even though if there was a way that both teams could lose,
it's just difficult to get hyped for it, I guess.
It's just two teams that I hate going at it, but they're both teams that, are good. And so it won't just be like a bad game.
That's true. I still think that the Patriots without Gronkowski are much harder to watch because Tom Brady's performance, incidentally, as yards per attempt or whatever, and adjusted yards per attempt, it drops pretty significantly without Gronkowski. So they are a little bit more difficult to watch without Gronkowski, and then also, I guess the running back situation is really, really good for them. So I think that they've probably gotten really interesting, well-designed run game. That's probably worth watching. But it's still going to be an exciting affair. I think Dallas is a really exciting team to watch, but I just can't get that excited about it in general. Even though I know that New England's going to come in very well prepared, they're going to execute really, really well, and they're going to have some interesting stuff in there to take advantage of what they have and what Dallas doesn't have. That because it's New England, they'll probably take advantage of stuff that literally no one else saw the entire season, and that should be fun. And then Dallas, of course. They've got this dominant offensive line, which is always a pleasure to watch, even if it is a little bit painful. And it's not that they've got the most interesting running scheme in the world or anything like that, but they do have interesting situations pop up for Prescott and Elliott. So as a Super Bowl, that wouldn't be a bad one for fans to watch. I'm just not invested.
I know it would be the two teams I hate the most, which I two easily hateable teams could maybe make random Super Bowl party is more fun. I don't know. And frankly, it says good things about the league if the two most dominant teams throughout the entire season. Because they're both 13-2 right now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if those two teams square off in the Super Bowl, then I think the league has almost perfect parity. Like, and it's just in the two best of the Super Bowl. Hooray!
Well, not so much perfect parity, right? Because good teams doing well doesn't necessarily mean parity, but it does mean that like. It kind of means the system works in a way, right?
It's actually the opposite of perfect parity because not every team went 9-8 or 8-8.
It's only 16 games, Dusty. Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm okay with like the best team winning the Super Bowl. I think it's happened rarely enough. Like where the best team wins the Super Bowl, that it's like still kind of like an interesting thing that happens.
Well, yeah, and it'll have happened 2 years in a row.
If you say so.
Yeah. Okay, so you alluded to, I guess, kind of, well, Deadspin nailed it. They were like, a lame scandal to end a lame season.
Oh, that's a great headline.
Which, well, it wasn't the headline. It was I guess, the lead to their story about the the cover up about Terrence Newman going off script. But after such a great start to the season, we saw. The fortunes of the team decline, and then the frustration level kind of mount among fans and to a lesser extent media. And, after last week, not the Packers game, but after the Colts game, you started to hear, we should fire this guy or fire that guy. Bradford trade was a bad idea. Maybe we should get rid of Mike Zimmer. Maybe we should get rid of Rick Spielman. Just like a lot of silly nonsense, which, is fine. You work through disappointment in your own way. But then, after the Packers game, Jordy Nelson, of course, lights up everybody for about 600,000 yards. And we found out afterward that from Mike Zimmer, who admonished himself for being, quote-unquote, too honest, that apparently, at least on the first series, the defensive backs had gone off script and not run the coverages that Zimmer intended them to run. Specifically, Xavier Rhodes customarily, we even talked about this as though it was going to happen again on the preview show with Justice. Xavier Rhodes should be matched up with Jordy Nelson for, most of the game. Turned out not to be the case. Turned out they usually went with no one, and consequently, Jordy had a great game.
Okay, so this is actually a little bit more complicated to break down because as the story has evolved, it's changed, right? Like I guess that's what things do when they evolve, they change. But in this case, the story of what literally happened in the game is different. And so our initial story was based off of a Xavier Rhodes quote, like the words that Xavier Rhodes said, were that they switched off after the first half. That they went, instead of sides, they went to shadowing. After the first half. And in the second half, Jordy Nelson was held, I think, to like 9 yards or something like that. So that story made a lot of sense, right? First half they didn't shadow, second half they did. But then, things changed. So first Matt Vensel, who's either him or Andrew Kramer ended up getting the quote. They both work for the Star Tribune, so, Matt Vensel ends up breaking it down and sees that, in the third or fourth series, Rhodes is actually covering Nelson on the other side of the field, on the side of the field that's not the side that, Xavier Rhodes takes when they're taking, quote unquote sides. Because I think Xavier Rhodes is the right cornerback and the other cornerback is necessarily then the left cornerback. And so, he's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. What happened in the second and third series? Well, Jordy Nelson was in the slot for a lot of them. And even when Rhodes is shadowing a receiver very often, he won't go into the slot because, he's just too stiff-hipped for that. And he's not trained to do slot stuff. He's trained to use the boundary and stuff like that. And so, that was kind of its own thing. And as the story continued, it seems like it only happened for one series. And when Terrence Newman asked Mike Zimmer if they could continue it or something like that, Mike Zimmer said, no, do your job. I don't really know. There's actually a pretty great breakdown, I think, by Brian Murphy in the Pioneer Press that kind of it's either that or Kevin Seifert in ESPN. I'll post the link in the show notes eventually. But one of the two of them end up doing a pretty good breakdown of here's probably so the story's changed from, the day the game was played, which was Saturday, to Sunday to Monday and Tuesday. Like there's like 4 different sets of quotes to piece together from Mike Zimmer and Xavier Rhodes and Terrence Newman. And, Mike Zimmer spoke multiple times, and we didn't get a Mike Zimmer quote after the game, after we got this quote, or rather, we didn't get a Mike Zimmer quote after we got this quote from Xavier Rhodes, and now we've got multiple quotes from multiple people. So here's what we can piece together. The fact that Mike Zimmer said, I was probably too honest after the game, probably means that what he said after the game is the truth. Anything that he contradicts that is probably, something to be held to a high degree of suspicion. Also, we're not idiots. We can see what happened on the film. And so he pieces all this together. And what likely happened is that there's a good chance that, like most scandals, this is overblown, but still represents some degree of a concern. What likely happened is that Terrence Newman wanted to play sides for a second. And that was a successful series. They punted. It was like a 4-and-out or something like that. They got like 1 first down and then they punted. I don't remember. But it was a pretty successful series. It happened really quickly. I remember because I, criticized the Vikings for not taking the ball for the first possession, and then they immediately get possession after they force a punt. So that was a pretty successful series. And then after that series, they go back to what the normal game plan was. So whatever happened in the first half was just, the Vikings being bad at defending Jordy Nelson being good at attacking the Vikings. And so Xavier Rhodes, according to this breakdown that makes a lot of sense, I probably stand by it. I'll link it. Is that Xavier Rhodes? I don't know. Was peer pressured by? I don't really know, but followed the direction of. How about that? Follow the direction of Terrence Newman, who said, "Let's do this." Terrence Newman is the veteran. He's got like a personal relationship with Mike Zimmer. He's followed Mike Zimmer throughout his career. Kind of makes sense, right? That he had listened to Terrence Newman, the veteran, who's been to like multiple Pro Bowls and all that. What to, where to do, what to do, and how to play. Like that's what the vets are for. So then Mike Zimmer told them to like stop it or something like that. It's actually really difficult. Justice even said this, I think either to us or on a different podcast, that it's really difficult to get a view from the sidelines of what exactly is happening as a coach. And so, he may not have even seen it. But he told them to like play to their assignment and stuff like that. So my guess is that Terrence Newman probably for the first series they shut down Jordy Nelson. Terrence Newman probably went to Mike Zimmer and said, "See, it works. We did it in the first game. Xavier Rhodes wasn't even here for the first game that we played. We shut down Jordy Nelson. Here we are again. We're playing sides. We're very comfortable playing sides. I just played up against Jordy Nelson and he didn't get anything. It works." And Mike Zimmer was like, "Just listen to the game plan." So that's probably what happened. But I mean, I don't like, when it, because it seems like they didn't listen to Zimmer. I don't think, because some people are saying, hey, players are big parts of the game plan. They probably adjusted the game plan, or there's some level of latitude given to the defensive backs, and they use that latitude. And I don't think that's what happened. I don't think, I think that they literally directly defied, Mike Zimmer's game plan, or went contra to his game plan, went out there to prove a point, actually kind of proved it, and then went back to his game plan. I think it's concerning. I think that they need to listen to the coach and stuff like that, but I don't think it's nearly as big, as what people are saying. So that's my analysis, because I've been reading an article about this, or 2 or 3 articles about this, like literally every day as the story has like continued, and I think I've captured everything. I'm sure some listeners read more of it than I have, and therefore they've captured more of it than I have. But that's the story as I guess I see it.
So Zimmer's lost the locker room, and we should ditch him and pick up Rex Ryan, right?
Yeah, no, I think that if you've got locker room and discipline problems, you definitely want to pick up Rex Ryan. So that makes sense. Just fire him, pick up Rex Ryan. Probably get Rob in the deal. And Rob Ryan's defenses are always good the first year you have them. They're bad afterwards, but the first year, yeah, it's fine. We're good.
That's right. I imagine Rob would appreciate the opportunity to work with all that talent. And also potentially be invited to the Donut Club.
Oh, yeah, he'd be all about that, wouldn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I would. Although I guess, if I had the Vikings defense to coordinate, they would probably be good for about 1 year. And then once my influence was clear, it'd drop off somewhat. But seriously, though.
So, the first 4 weeks, you'd just be like, do what you were doing last year, right?
I'd be like, this is still the playbook from last year, right? All right, we're sticking with this. We'll introduce some wrinkles later, and then right as I get comfortable with about 30% of it, I'll start changing things. And We won't get all the way until week 16 without Terrence Newman freelancing on me.
What's the name of that that book, Things Fall Apart? That's what the title of your defensive coordinating would be.
Yeah, that'll be the 30 for 30 about my brief tenure coaching in the NFL for no particular reason. But seriously though, like Zimmer's future, secure, right? With the Vikings, like this is like a lot of the stuff that's happened this year can't really be blamed on him. And this, I mean, I think like you were saying, while annoying and a distraction, is not as big a deal as has been made out to be.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's like something that, needs to be addressed by the coaching staff with the players, but like not in a heads will roll, fire everybody, cut Terrence Newman or, whatever, right? Like I think, it's just going to have a meeting and talk about it for a second.
Well, so what's Terrence Newman's future like? I mean, he's got to be running on empty. I mean, maybe not empty, but what, 1-2 more years?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine him playing cornerback at 41. It's not like I envision him as the Jerry Rice of the other side of the field. But I feel like you keep giving him 1-year deals until he fails, right? Like there's like no other. He's really good. Like there's like no other like way to approach it. Like, he is clearly an invaluable vet. Like if for example Xavier Rhodes fell, so this is kind of a weird thing. This story kind of proves the value that Terrence Newman provides, even though it proved an instance where he was providing, negative value. The reason that is because Xavier Rhodes, a Pro Bowl cornerback having a great year against the top receivers in the country, who has been in the NFL for, I think this is his 4th year, right? He just got his option extended and stuff like that and picked up. If Xavier Rhodes feels comfortable listening to Terrence Newman about playing cornerback, then clearly Terrence Newman is providing value as a veteran who is teaching players how to play cornerback. And at the same time, and this is why he's not Chad Greenway, at the same time he's playing at a very high level. So he's not just teaching, he's like doing even better. And from a statistical perspective, he's playing even better than Xavier Rhodes. Players who play opposite him are the worst in the NFL per route. Like, I think Pro Football Focus put this out just recently. In fact, I retweeted it from Eric Eager, a Pro Football Focus employee, who said, Terrence Newman still leads the league in yards per coverage snap allowed. And that doesn't mean he's the best corner in the NFL. Players like Patrick Peterson and Xavier Rhodes follow the best receiver. And so it's really difficult to claim, that's the best player in the NFL when they don't tend to play very often against the best receiver. And, the difference between that and like Richard Sherman, when he used to play size, that Richard Sherman would still very often be matched up against the top receivers in the NFL and then shut them down. Like when he had an opportunity to play those top receivers, he did it. And then when he didn't, because the way they played sides, it modified the offense's plan to play 10 on 10. And that's a little bit different than, Terrence Newman following the second receiver. That's still very good, obviously. I don't think you're going to get a better, you can be, there's literally no statistically better CB2 in the NFL. And so that's like super friggin' valuable. I think there are games where he didn't give up a yard in coverage. And if he did, there's definitely games where he's given up fewer than 6 yards in coverage. I know there's a game where he's given up negative yards in coverage over the course of at least one half and maybe net zero over the course of the game. So he's really good. And I feel like we have to wait for him to be bad before you get rid of him. Like this is the argument for keeping Adrian Peterson after like 2013, before the 2014 scandals and stuff like blew up. Like Adrian Peterson had a really good year. He's turning old, whatever, right? Terrence Newman needs to prove to be bad, I think, before you decide not to get another deal with him. And this thing with Zimmer, I don't think it undermines Zimmer's authority. I don't think it's an example where, Terrence Newman is like this mutineer or anything like that. I think it's just his ego was on the line. And I think the reason he didn't make the Pro Bowl is because of his reputation following the number 2 corner. And I think that had a relationship with it. And he just wanted to get out of that. And that stuff happens. You just have to deal with it as a coach. And I think they're dealing with it, and that's fine. So keep giving him 1-year deals until he like turns into dust or whatever. And I think you're good, because I don't trust Trey Waynes. Mackenzie Alexander's had a bad year. Hopefully he'll improve. that sort of stuff.
Well, okay, so you mentioned him briefly. What about Adrian Peterson? Is he has he played his last snap with the Vikings? Are we just gonna take the cap hit and hope that somebody else picks him up?
I mean, like, if you can find a way to make him play the last game, make him play the last game. I'm not opposed to that. Getting like the very last ounces of value you can get out of his contract. But I mean, essentially, yeah, cut him. I mean, okay, so the argument for cutting him is already obvious. It's clear that the $18 million cap hit is untenable. That is more than twice the amount. I think it's 2.5 times the amount of the second largest cap hit, which I think is LaShawn McCoy's, a little bit over $8 million. So hold on, it's about 2.125 times, right? So it's over twice as much. And that's nuts. Like that's dumb. And the Vikings shouldn't pay it, and there's no reason to pay it because he's not even playing as a top running back. And I think that, and here's like the thing, like, I think there's essentially two camps to Adrian Peterson, and I think the second camp is growing. But the first camp, is that, it's not his fault, right? Which I understand. That's an understandable argument. It's not his fault. The offensive line is blocking poorly. He cannot produce additional yards beyond what he's, capable of doing given what they give him. And that's understandable, right? The second camp is that it is, to some extent, his fault. That he's not special. He might not even be good. He's okay, maybe. And even if he's good, he's not worth $18 million, right? There's a possibility for the Vikings to grow with the position, either with Jerick McKinnon or, with C.J. Ham, which is probably unlikely, or, running back in the draft. It's a phenomenal class of running backs in the draft. You could probably find a starter in the 3rd or 4th round, right? Or some combination, of those. You go young, you find out what you have, that sort of stuff. Adrian Peterson is not good enough to warrant delaying, some additional investment in the running back position. So those are basically the two camps. And I don't think those two camps really, I think that if either of those conclusions are true, there's still not a reason to keep Adrian, because if it's not his fault, then unless you've got a 1-year fix for the offensive line, then he cannot provide value for the Vikings. He's not providing additional value more than Jerick McKinnon and Matt Asiata. Both of them are getting more yards before contact than he is, and also more yards after contact than he is this year. And that's really disturbing, given, he's supposed to have, this incredible vision, and he did, and he kind of does, but he doesn't. He's not reacting as quickly to stuff as he did before, and maybe that's because he thinks his body's going to do stuff that it can't do. He's not pushing through piles in the same way that he is anymore. His best run was a fumble. He's just not doing stuff, right? And so if it's not his fault, you're going to have to explain why these other running backs are outperforming him behind the same offensive line, even in the same games. But if it's not his fault, also there's no reason to keep him, because the money that you're spending on him could be used to invest in the very thing that is preventing him from being able to run well. And that thing will also enable other parts of the offense. So I think it's the end of Adrian Peterson, Minnesota. I don't like the idea of signing him to a cheap 3-year deal. He can go be Thomas Jones somewhere else and provide some value as a running back on sort of last gasp, but I don't think he's coming back.
Tough but fair. I would be fine with seeing him go. A couple of random calls for Rick Spielman's head. I guess this is all about mostly about the Sam Bradford trade and why we should not have given up a first-round pick in a draft that's supposedly replete with running backs, which it sounds like, I guess, we need. I don't know. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
I mean, we covered the Bradford trade before several times. I've walked back my stance that it was a bad idea. And now, I'm not going to say it was a good trade, but I'm going to say that the people who said it was a bad trade are wrong, if that makes sense. I think that the evidence that we have available to us is just not good enough for us to say that it was a bad trade. I also don't think it's necessarily enough to say that it's a good trade, but the evidence is definitely leaning more in that direction. I still don't think Sam Bradford is a particularly spectacular quarterback, and I think that the second half of the season was why. He's played well in some losses. He's played poorly in some wins. But I think overall, over the second half of the season, especially these final 4 games, he's kind of reverted to the kind of quarterback that I thought I saw in Philadelphia, which is a one-read quarterback, a guy who is aware of pressure generally, but not specifically, and a guy who it can be accurate in short and intermediate, and probably more accurate than Teddy Bridgewater is on the deep pass, but not as accurate sort of in the intermediate, but is just way too willing to make small plays that do not provide rewards. And so that's who I think it is. And so I think that for most of the year, you maybe didn't get that guy. And from that perspective, maybe a first-round pick was worth it. And I think the reason he became not that guy has to do with stuff that was, I'm not going to say out of Spielman's control, but not predictable when we were at the beginning of the season. And so like those are things that I think absolve Spielman of the decision to trade a first-round pick, even though it would be super nice to have that first-round pick right now. Beyond that, I think that when you say, hey, it's Spielman's fault that the offensive line is really poor, I think that generally that's true, but I think that this year it's kind of not true. So like if you're talking about the conditions that led to Spielman signing Andre Smith and signing Alex Boone and the awful deal that he had with Matt Khalil, like he just miscalculated there, and drafting Willie Beavers, which did happen that year in fairness. But if you're talking about like the conditions that led to the Vikings making the offseason moves that they did, yeah, there's definitely some blame that should be laid at Spielman's feet directly. But if you're talking about how he handled this offseason in terms of the offensive line, I think that that's not necessarily true. Like, yeah, drafting Willie Beavers was a mistake, and there are some people that were drafted after him that I think probably did a better job. Even people that I don't think are necessarily all that good of a player, like Joe Hag, for example. I think that signing Andre Smith made a lot of sense. I think that keeping Lodeholt on a reduced deal made a lot of sense. I think trying John Sullivan out at center, that made a lot of sense. And instead of like getting rid of them all before camp started, I think that re-signing Mike Harris, that made a ton of sense. And all of these things were kind of out of his control. Yeah, Lodeholt might be injury prone, but I think that you take a couple of injury prone players, the odds of all of them getting injured, even if they're all injury prone, the odds of all of them getting injured for the season at the beginning of the season are actually really, really, really low. Like if you take a player who is injury prone, which injury predictor says is something like a 45% chance of happening, and only look at the beginning of the season, those odds drop dramatically. When you multiply them against each other, those odds drop even more. So I think that you sign a couple of injury prone players. If one or two of them get injured, yeah, that's predictable. That's probably your fault. If all of them get injured, that's not on you, man. That's just luck playing you a bad hand. That's like a healthy player who gets injured at the beginning of the season, and then they blame you for it. And that's like not really fair. Like I don't think, for example, Sharif Floyd, had an injury history that we know at Florida that would indicate that he was injury prone. But in the NFL, he has been injury prone. I wouldn't blame Spielman for that, for example. I think that's kind of the case. It's kind of a similar type of situation with this offensive line. I think that he made good moves on this offensive line, and I think Alex Boone has played well in the last 10 or 12 games with the Vikings. Something like 12 or 13 actually, I think is probably a good way to put it. And he's played well, and so that's great. He re-signed Joe Berger, even though Berger's agent was playing hardball with him. That's great. He's been playing well. He traded for Nick Easton. That was great. I mean, Nick Easton has kind of flopped a little bit in the last 2 games, but I'm actually kind of fine with the performance given the way, things shook out. And that's all, he deserves credit for that, right? I don't think he could have predicted that Matt Khalil would get injured for the year, even though Matt Khalil has always played hurt. And then he signed Jake Long. That was a great deal. That was a great idea. So I think that when you talk about Rick Spielman, I think that it should largely be positive. And I've been a Spielman defender for years, so this is not surprising. And I know like some people listening to this podcast have either already turned it off or they're rolling their eyes. But I think that when you think about the team in general, I think that Spielman deserves a lot of credit. Like if our argument is that this team is so close to doing well, but they have one glaring problem that wasn't addressed, then you have to answer the question of why were they doing well? And I think that Spielman deserves a lot of credit for why they were doing well. They were doing well maybe because of the Bradford trade, because they drafted all these great defensive players. Xavier Rhodes wasn't even, with the Mike Zimmer evaluation staff. He was under Rick Spielman with Leslie Frazier, right? Harrison Smith, same deal, right? They're two of the most important players. Rick Spielman was open-minded enough to see a guy who was a pure edge rusher, at his entire career at UCLA, and before that he played running back, right? And listened to this coach, and the coach said, "I think I can make him a linebacker." As a linebacker, and he was like, "Yeah, I agree. That dude's worth the 9th overall pick." Anthony Barr, by the way, played well in this Green Bay game, played kind of dog shit this year, but for most of his career with Minnesota has been pretty spectacular. He deserves credit for that. He deserves credit for drafting Eric Hendricks. I don't think that you get to erase his credit just because a good defensive coach showed up. Some of those pieces were already there, and he used them really well. He signed Linval Joseph, for example. He's the best nose tackle in the NFL. He drafted Everson Griffin. That was way before Mike Zimmer, right? And Everson Griffin's maturity came under Leslie Frazier, not Rick Spielman. Brian Robinson has played well in about half the games this year. That's entirely, a Spielman pick. So I think that he definitely deserves credit and not blame. And so I think his future with the Minnesota Vikings should be secure.
Excellent. What about the zinc panels on the outside of US Bank Stadium? Are they secure?
No, they've fallen.
Generally, no. It turns out there's...
Thompson pointed that out. Or he saw the story. I guess he wasn't the original one to point it. He saw the story and put it into Vikings Twitter, which was excellent service. Eric Thompson, the metaphor is complete. It is 2010.
Viking Stadium literally falling apart. Article in the Star Tribune writes, both moisture and wind previously caused trouble for the $1.1 billion building that opened in August.
Are they not expecting moisture and wind? Is that...
Well, get this. Thousands of these panels line the exterior of the building. The article refers to it as the problematic western prow, which is like...
That's great.
That's a great name for like a Decemberist cover band.
It is. Oh my gosh. That's a great name for... the next Decemberists album.
Yes. So get this. Thousands of panels, 12 inches high, 6 to 12 feet long. Initially, the panels were bolted down to the problematic prow only along the bottom edge.
What?
Yes. After heavy storms last summer, some panels came loose and flapped in the wind. Wow, there's wind and rain in Minnesota?
Who knew? They flap. So like the bottom is bolted in and the top's flapped.
Yep.
That before they fell, that must have been actually a really interesting sight.
I wonder if they weren't like kind of designed that way to be, visually arresting, but not so much so that they actually like fell off and, caused harm to the building.
Yeah, this is the classic designer, artist, architect problem. This looks interesting and could be dangerous, but we'll just bolt the bottom.
Well, yeah, and then the architect tells the developer, well, and the best part is you only have to bolt them on the bottom side. And the developer looks at the contractor and is like, perfect, let's do it. Luckily, the contractor, Mortensen, M.A. Mortensen, is, the building is under warranty with the contractor for 2 years. So if zinc panels continue to peel off and blow away in the wind like Viking playoff hopes, then Mortensen will be there to repair and replace them. Although after last summer, workers came and reinforced the panels along the top edge, so now wind can apparently only blow through them a little bit. But they also had problems with like moisture getting in underneath. But I'm sure that'll all be fine.
All the edges.
Yeah, they really should have just bolted them down like that.
I don't like. So you bolted the bottom edge, and now you're assuming you're the same person. Your job is to bolt the top edge because it just wasn't working. Mm-hmm. And like you just look at the side panels, and you're like, well, they're not paying me to bolt the sides of these panels.
Exactly. They only sent me up with enough bolts to do the tops. I
think I'm going to be back up here.
It is common for new buildings to exhibit unexpected stress in the first full cycles of seasons, particularly a massive and custom structure like the stadium. Mortensen executive John Wood said the replacement of the barrier is expected to cost the company up to $4 million.
Oh.
The company, not taxpayers.
Yeah, no, I know it's not
the
taxpayers
team.
or the Wilfs, evidently. Because the company fucked up.
Yeah, like a 3% cost penalty for not bolting down your zinc.
Yeah, I mean, they probably should have seen that coming. Like, more than Rick Spielman should have seen all the offensive line entry coming.
Well, as someone who has been like at ground zero for a handful of much smaller construction projects, it is
What kind of and keep going.
new bars. Like when places upgrade or like you go into a new place, you're
Or they
there
consult the bartender. Yeah, it needs to be longer than that. Have you ever been to a bar? Much longer.
No, but they have to come and tell me that, I'm going to have to take a couple more weeks off because construction was delayed because of some nonsense thing that nobody foresaw or adequately planned for.
Okay, so
there's your substantive answer.
Hearing about you getting a paycheck delayed is what you're saying.
Well, not having actual work delayed. Like, you're supposed to be working in this space on the 1st, but it won't be ready until the 14th because we installed the gas lines backwards is one that I've heard. Like they were supposed to be like the lines were supposed to face out towards the stove, but instead they face towards the prep line instead. Oops.
Oh no.
Oops. But just a series of oopses like that, and
so this is one of them.
And design errors. I mean, it's a larger design error because it's a larger project. But anytime you try and build something, there's plenty of people that are going to screw it up.
This is still like a net positive for not just financially immediately for Mortensen. Like obviously the stadium contract was a nice one, but like still from a PR perspective, if you say, yeah, we built the stadium, the US Bank Stadium, the one that you see when you look out the window, we built that. That's still better, like, because no one's going to be like, didn't the panels fall off?
Yeah, and even if they do, you can be like, yeah, and we fixed them at no cost to you, Mr. Taxpayer. This time.
I guess they're lucky that no one died this time.
I mean, they're just like, they're a foot wide. I mean, zinc isn't that heavy. And
I imagine zinc falling from a great height is relatively...
I wonder if those panels even reach terminal velocity on their way down.
I mean, no, they're not that high up. But such great heights. Another sub-pop artist. We're really hitting all the notes here.
Wow.
Aha. I'm sorry.
You should be. We have a schedule for 2017 finalized after our ignominious defeat in Green Bay. Home schedule, okay. Away schedule, less so.
Yeah, that away schedule is brutal to the extent that we have the ability to predict how good teams are going to be, 9 months before the season starts. But that's it's not pretty, right? Like, because I think you go through the away schedule and there's like one team, and it's the Browns, and that's not really an away game because it's in London. And aside from the divisional ones like the Bears, it's pretty bad. Like there's the Lions and the Packers who are contending for a playoff spot. Hopefully the Packers don't get one.
It's the Bears, the Browns, and the 2016 playoffs.
Exactly, right? Because you got the Packers, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Steelers, and the Redskins.
Yep.
Like it's the 2016 playoffs plus the Bears and Browns.
Which, womp womp.
But, I mean, historically speaking, half of those teams are also going to be bad. So really, that's a great road schedule. And if you only got bad teams, that's when you have to worry.
That's true. And at least we get to play the Saints in Minneapolis.
Functionally, I'm not threatened by them anymore.
not even in the Mercedes-Benz toilet dome.
I mean, they're what's the term 4chan uses? They're dome babbies. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's good, man. I don't even know what that means. I'm too old for 4chan. Ugh. They actually took away my 4chan license on my birthday. Yeah, well, I guess let's maybe save the prognosticating until maybe after the draft. Does that seem like a fair place to start? We'll have plenty of time then.
Right.
I just wanted to mention that it happened, and it's set in stone now, I guess. Do we know which games can be flexed into primetime yet? Are there any opportunities for us to be embarrassed by by otherwise good teams on the road? Or is that...
I mean, there's always divisional games at the end of the season, but flexing doesn't occur until partway through the season, which means we don't know which games will be flexed because we don't know the schedule. We only know what the opponents are going to be.
Oh, okay. Well, I suppose we could talk a little bit about the Packers game. It was maybe not ideal. Zen Cupid wrote in with a Twitter question. When did you quit, paying attention? Like, when did you check out? And I actually, I was in it until probably about 10 or 12 minutes in the fourth quarter. Like, that game was such just, trash and garbage, and Aaron Rodgers doing whatever he wanted, butted up against, random flashes of offensive brilliance against a team with just, a total garbage defense.
Yeah.
And so I never really felt like we were completely out of it until we were down, 2 scores with 10 minutes left. I was like, they're really not... I'm not getting anything put together. I think momentum's against us.
Yeah, for me, I obviously have to keep watching it because I have to keep watching it. But emotionally, when I check out, which I think is the thrust of the question, emotionally when I checked out was probably at halftime. I think after halftime, I was just like, I just don't see what a comeback looks like. And when that happens, when you can't envision what it looks like, it's very difficult for you to emotionally reinvest yourself in the game.
Yeah, or when unicorns are involved, all right, all we need is for Aaron Rodgers to just evaporate, be beamed away by an alien spacecraft, and then we might have a shot. Yeah, it was very...
exactly.
We talked a little bit about the Jordy Nelson situation, which was very frustrating to watch. I would think you would want to cover him with at least one defensive back. And it seemed like he kept, freezing up the cornerbacks and a safety with, he would catch the ball, and the triangle of backs around him would be like, oh, God, he got the ball, and then he would be gone.
Yeah, and there were situations, aside from, that, there were definitely situations where you've got, blown coverages and stuff like that, and relatively undisciplined play from the secondary and the defensive backs. And I think that for the second game in a row, you could say the secondary played extremely poorly in a season where they've been kind of the highlight of, what the Minnesota Vikings have to offer defensively. And even when, you have the right assignments, people are playing what they're supposed to play. There's just this hole in coverage that Jordy Nelson is at, or, Aaron Rodgers is holding onto the ball for 8 seconds instead of 2.5, right, which is pretty normal for a quarterback. And the Vikings were just not good at the scramble drill or whatever, and Nelson would just be wide open. It wouldn't even necessarily be because of Nelson's, route running ability or capability as a receiver overall, although, you don't want to deny that. But he would just be open because of just the mistakes that the Minnesota defensive backs were making. And so that was really frustrating.
Yeah, I think you could tell that Harry Smith was definitely still injured, even though he was playing. He lacked a lot of the explosiveness that I come to associate with him. It seemed like we didn't really employ him as much in the safety blitz as we have prior to his, injury flare up.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure how much of that has to do with what the game plan would be against, a team that has the capability of passing deep, and how much of that has to do with we don't want to put you in situations where you're constantly going to be battered, right? If you got this injury that you've recovered ungodly quickly from, we don't want to put you in a situation where we're going to be testing, the integrity of your repair as quickly as possible, right? So I don't know, what it is, but I think that probably played a role in the way that they designed their game plan, because they really do love having him at the line of scrimmage and threatening to rush the passer, because he's been probably the best pass rushing safety over the last couple of years in the NFL. And so, which is not an enormously important distinction to have, but it's nice. And, you don't employ him in that way. That's, it's probably related to the injury he just had, which in turn impacts the effectiveness that the Minnesota defense can have overall.
It's they found a way to create injury problems for, maybe not found a way, but the injury problems were happening for players who were on the field, not just off the field, which was pretty great to watch. And I don't know if Aaron Rodgers just smeared a stick of butter on his socks before he went out there, but you were very kind when you said that we failed a little bit at the scramble drill. I mean, he managed to dodge some tackles from players that customarily get the tackle.
Yeah, and it was tough because, like, you take a look at, for example, the game that Daniel Hunter had. Hunter actually had a really great game, both as a run defender and as a pass rusher. And you couldn't help but wonder that even though, he had a great game, Linval Joseph had a friggin' phenomenal game. I'm sure, that it's, another one of those games that's going to end up, like, making the case for him as, like, a premier nose tackle and stuff like that. But you take a look at the games that they had and their ability to flush Aaron Rodgers into, a couple of other people, and you're wondering, like, man, you were really close. It just sucks. Like, what could have been? Like, this felt like a game where Aaron Rodgers could have ended up with twice as many sacks as he ended up getting. And obviously that didn't happen.
Well, and 7 or 14 fewer points. I mean,
exactly.
One of those scrambles, he friggin' ran away for a touchdown.
Yeah. And that was weird. That was a Xavier Rhodes screw up, if I remember correctly, because he like took the wrong angle or something. Like, I don't.
Well,
I remember
it was
watching
a crazy long
Xavier
scramble,
Rhodes
like
screwed up, and I can't even describe how.
It was so it was Everson Griffin that almost had him on the initial tackle, right? But then
and I always feel like we know objectively you're faster than this person, Everson. You're faster than Aaron Rodgers. We know that. Like, you used to be a punt gunner. Aaron Rodgers is a little older than you, which is kind of weird to think about. And you clearly show more explosiveness, off the line of scrimmage or when you're running. And you had and objectively, like, you had a better 40. So, like, why can't you run this dude down? But, regardless, Everson misses Aaron Rodgers. He moves around the edge, and
then Xavier Rhodes is somewhere, not between the goal line and Aaron Rodgers, regrettably, but like what? I don't know. I think I would like to actually. I might have to go back and watch the all 22 on that play, because I would be interested to know where exactly the final breakdown at the last level was for that.
Yeah, and it's clear that, like, he screwed up, right? Like, you watch unquestionably, like, he screwed up the final part of that play. But it is really difficult for me to describe how.
In a way that only Xavier Rhodes can. Terrence Newman told him to do it. Terrence Newman told you to jump off a bridge. Would you do it?
He's such a great leader, I would.
If, depending on his actual, like, physical proximity to me, like, if he was close enough to physically, like, throw me over the bridge if I refused, I might.
Yeah. If I'm going to feel that much pain, I'm going to do it to myself.
It's like, it's okay, Mr. Newman. Don't get your gloves dirty. I got this. And then I just, like, pinch my nose and go back over the... So the offense, it's very frustrating to look at Vikings game after Vikings game on paper and see Sam Bradford, great completion rate, lots of yards, a couple of touchdowns. Adam Thielen, 200 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns, and that's it. Like a little bit of offensive contribution here and there from other players. Kyle Rudolph, a little bit here and there. Patterson was on the field for a few minutes, I think. It was a good performance, sort of, and the line was okay, but like, we made fun of Green Bay's defense, and sure enough, Clinton Dix was right there. But I mean, other than the fantasy owners that like started Adam Thielen, like if you somehow ended up in like the fantasy football finals and you had Adam Thielen on your team, then you probably won your league. So he led all wide receivers.
I won the 9th place consolation game in the Norse Code League with Adam Thielen. Thank you.
Oh, congratulations. I finished in 6th. I was one of 3, 8, and 5 teams, and I was the only one to not finish in the top 4.
Yeah. The Yahoo delightfully reminded me that I led the league in points against, so thanks for that, Yahoo. You didn't need to do that. It was a game recap, not a season recap. Stop it.
Yeah, thanks, info.
I mean, like, and actually Bradford did have this problem in the game too. So he had 50 passing attempts. So like saying that he had 382 yards or saying that he had 3 touchdowns, like it's really muted by the fact that he passed the ball so friggin' often. And it's not even like the Vikings refused to run the ball. Like they had 20 rushing attempts. 2 of them were Sam Bradford, so some of them weren't planned. But, like, that's not, like, an extraordinarily low amount. It's an amount of rushing attempts that's kind of on the lowish side. But 50 passing attempts, like, obviously it's low within that context. And so, like, this is a game where I think that we saw him consistently pass on his first read, and I think that it really kind of hurt, what the Vikings were doing. Obviously, some of those deeper shots to Adam Thielen were worth it. Obviously, the 71-yard run was worth it, and all that. But I think that we continued to see situations where he was situationally unaware of like what needed to happen and what he was doing, and what situation the Vikings were in. And I think that definitely related to it. And so I think that a lot of the yards are kind of empty. Obviously, that last touchdown occurred in garbage time. I don't think it's a statement. I mean, yeah, he had 110.6 passer rating. I don't think it's a statement game from him. But I do think it is some level of evidence that it was largely a defensive problem than an offensive problem. Because when we weren't in garbage time, he had like a passer rating of 102, right? Like that touchdown helped him a lot in terms of passer rating. But like he had a passer rating of like 102 at halftime. The Vikings were averaging, over 4 yards a carry. So it wasn't because the run game kept on taking him off schedule. But part of it was that the defense was playing poorly. Another part of it is that Bradford, again, wasn't taking it. Like, if you get 16 yards on 3rd and 17, that looks great in a passer rating statistic, but it doesn't look great, in terms of on-field performance. And there's some level of that, too, early on in the game. And so, that has to do with, like, situational awareness and stuff like that. But there is some level of evidence that this at least suggests that, the defense was largely the problem. But I think that you're right that the offense wasn't, like, spectacular by any means, despite, what are some really good numbers.
They were fine. I mean, they looked better than, they looked fine because Green Bay's defense is so bad, but they were fine, I guess.
Yeah, I think fine or better than fine is a good way to describe it, even though like these leading indicator statistics are very good.
Well, congratulations on winning your consolation game with Adam Thielen. at least some good came out of this for someone.
Yeah, for someone somewhere. I'm sure Adam Thielen hit like a bonus or something too, so congrats.
He better. Well, and I think now like his trade stock has gone up somewhat after having such a phenomenal year. I mean, he's going to be the guy that finishes with 1,000 yards, right?
Yeah. He's at
He's at like
what
9.
He's at 960.
960. Okay, yeah. And then Diggs is at like 900-ish. He needs to have like basically a 100-yard game to get there.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that Diggs would be the one, but it's not like I hate Adam Thielen or anything like that. So, I mean, if they both, it is possible that they both end up with. Diggs is at 903, so he needs a 97-yard game. The Vikings finally have their first pair of 800-yard receivers since 2001, so that's already happened.
It's true, and this would be if they somehow do hit their marks against Chicago this week, then that would be the first time we had 2,000-yard rushers since 2000.
Yes, yeah, that's both Carter and Moss, both times.
I know. Well, who else could it be? Like it was just yeah.
But yeah, it'd be nice. Just to have that in your pocket going into the off season. I'm pretty sure Adam Thielen's going to hit a bonus. Certainly, he's going to ramp up his likely to be earned incentives, which will increase the Vikings' cap hit, but will also just increase his contract numbers for himself. Like that's nice. Make money, dude.
Exactly. If the hometown boy can hang out at whatever is left of US Bank Stadium and make some more money for himself while thrilling the hometown fans and taking a Minnesota Victory Tour every offseason, I can think of worse ways to live.
Exactly.
Speaking of the Bears, I guess we got to play them this week. We can't just wave this one off. Although wouldn't that be funny if we did? If we actually if we just went on football strike? Like, no, we're too injured. We don't. If we play this game, then Joseph's head will explode. So we're not willing to take that risk.
Wave it off. I guess.
Does anybody really want to watch a Vikings-Bears game at this point? I mean, Chicago's 3-12. The Vikings, have I mean, at least we started off better. Otherwise, we'd be in a similar situation. Both teams are like really badly banged up.
Yeah, more than I think almost any other team in the league. The two teams that are probably the most banged up in Week 17 are playing each other. So there is that.
So if you got Red Zone Channel, don't worry about seeing any of this game.
You're fine.
We played between the 20s.
Yeah, okay. So there's not much different from our last Bears preview, right? We talked about a lot of the players in the game, about how Pernell McPhee is like actually someone to pay attention to and worry about, but then the rest of the defense, besides Jarrell Freeman and to some extent Adrian Amos, are bad. And I believe they've got a different inside linebacker this time, Nick Kwiatkowski. I believe they've got a different free safety this time, Deion Bush. They're both there because of injuries, so we know that they're bad too because they replaced bad players. That's not, I guess, not always the case. Tracy Porter is even worse now than he was, when the Vikings first played them. Bryce Callahan is a dude. He's not terrible or anything like that. And then you've got like a soft defensive front. Leonard Floyd, a lot of people are saying is promising, and that might be true, but he hasn't played. The last time we talked on this podcast about him, Leonard Floyd, we were like, hey, maybe he's a threat. He's been producing these last couple of games. And he was in that game. I think that he ended up having an impact in the Vikings Bears game the last time they played. But Leonard Floyd over the course of the season has actually not been that much of a threat, even if for a rookie he's developing relatively well. And then the only other player maybe is Akeem Hicks, who a lot of times he's playing kind of as a nose, and a lot of times he's playing as a 3-tech. But there's just like not players I'm worried about on this defense. Jarrell Freeman is like literally the only one that is playing well. So there is that defensively. I think in terms of attacking them, like it's obviously Thielen and Diggs. I think they're going to have a field day probably with Sam Bradford throwing the ball. I think that even when he plays as sort of a first read or a check down kind of quarterback, the way that the Bears have been giving up a lot of yards, and they've been giving up yards in every way. They've been giving up yards after catch, off of slants and these big gainers after catch. They've been giving them up deep. They've been giving up these intermediate throws that have no yards after catch. They've been giving up all kinds of passes, and so these cornerbacks in particular, I don't think there's a way that you design a game plan any differently than what you're comfortable with. So I think there's a really good chance that Thielen and Diggs could go off. I think that the running game is not going to be as good against the Bears as the passing game is going to be, just taking a look at their players. I haven't looked at the Bears as like statistical indicators, like in what their defense does, but I'm pretty confident that as pass defenders are not generally as good as they are run defenders. I'm going to take a quick look at Football Outsiders. Oh, actually, as run defenders, they're worse. Whatever. I think that statistically this matchup, because of the way the offensive line is oriented, is probably going to be better for the passing game. I'm not that optimistic about them running against like Akeem Hicks and Mitch Unrein, who's bad, and C.J. Wilson, who is like an okay nose tackle, and what's his name, Cornelius Washington, who. I always feel like he's a rookie, but he's been in the league for 4 years. I'm not as confident against those guys running the ball, given sort of who they have on the offensive line. But statistically, I guess they're worse at that. So that's something to keep an eye out for if you want, like a showcase of Ham and Asiata and McKinnon. Not that I think Ham is going to get much play. But yeah, I think that we're probably going to see a shootout from the Vikings, not out of necessity, not because the Vikings will fall so far behind that they're going to have to keep on throwing the ball, but I think it's probably just going to be the best matchup wise for the Vikings.
Yeah, to me it seems like the sort of game where throwing to Kyle Rudolph for 5 yards a down, and maybe throwing to Jerick McKinnon every third for 3 yards would be enough to move the ball down the field, but you really never know. And yeah, I mean, I don't have very low expectations for the run game. Who do you think will get more? Who will see more action, Asiata or McKinnon? Probably Asiata, huh?
No, I think it's going to be McKinnon.
Really?
I think and I think part of that has to do with the fact that it's not a great running back matchup in the passing game. But I do think that they just want to see more out of McKinnon, because I think that for the most part, I think that in terms of running back evaluation, I wouldn't be surprised if they just kind of put the whole year in the dustbin. And I think that the more we get of McKinnon, the more film we have of McKinnon in a situation where he gets average blocking, which has not been very much this year, the more information I'll have about the ability to make a decision moving forward at running back. I think that I think that that's just like the reasoning behind it. If you do get McKinnon matched up against one of the outside linebackers, then that's a pretty good matchup that Asiata I don't think would be able to exploit. Against one of those inside linebackers, I'm not super happy about McKinnon or Asiata lining up against them in the passing game. But I think we're going to see more McKinnon, just because I think there's more reason to put McKinnon out there from a long-term perspective.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much does Joe Buck love Clay Matthews?
I mean, probably an 8. I think Aaron Rodgers is probably up there at the brass ring, right, at number 10.
See, that was you saw. Get out of my head. You definitely saw through my 2-part question. I was waiting for you to say like 9.5, because it seemed like Clay Matthews was like poor Sam Bradford had like the 1,000-yard stare for like the last half of the game. He was. I can see what you mean about him kind of like reverting to like lizard-like quarterback instincts. And
exactly.
He just looked like he really needed a hug from somebody who was not Clay Matthews. And he got several of those and didn't seem to like any of them.
I mean, leave it up to the Vikings to give Clay Matthews, he's had how many sacks this year? 5? 2 of the 5 sacks have come against the Vikings.
Well,
Justice was right that Clay Matthews is having a bad year, but he was also right in his reverse jinx that Clay Matthews would have a good game.
Have a good game against the Vikings, yes.
Yeah.
But you definitely saw through the hidden second part of my question, which was going to be, well, then how much does Joe Buck love Aaron Rodgers?
Get out of my head, Charles.
Because the answer is all the way.
Yeah.
Like
he probably turns it up to 11.
Well, he even told Troy Aikman coming out of halftime, he's like, we could talk about anything you want, but we should really talk about Aaron Rodgers. It's just like, man, Joe, I just hate you so much. I don't hate him. I'm sure he's a fine person. He was very funny on Wait, Don't Tell Me. He's
supposed to be amazing in person. Like, he's funny and like charming and personable, and he's not like emotionless. In person, he's evidently everything that he's not as an announcer.
Well, it's not that he's not like down to earth and homey and personable when he's announcing. It's just like he sounds like the live announcer version of a Mitch Albom book. And that's like...
That's great. That's kind of a deep cut. Google Mitch Albom Deadspin if you want to hear more about that.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not familiar with Mitch Albom, I mean, I maybe wouldn't go so far as Deadspin did. They like to really put themselves out there on their takes, but
they put him to the screws. A revered sports writer. I'll stop there. He was.
better known for the book he wrote that became a film, Tuesdays with Morrie, for those who are not baseball types. Anyway, there's Minnesota. So are we going to play this game like we tried hard this season, it didn't work out for us, let's go out there and have fun beating these fools, or we tried really hard and it didn't work out for us, let's rest our precious few remaining starters and go out there and try not to make total asses of ourselves and then cock it all up in the media?
I mean, there's like value in trying to win, and I don't mean that like in like the sarcastic sense.
No. I mean, they're going to try to win, but I mean, are we going to see like a happy-go-lucky team that, is congratulatory and cheering and fired up, when we get those big defensive hits that we're going to probably repeatedly get? Or is this going to be just like a heads down, all business Vikings team?
No, I think it's going to be like a heads down, all business Vikings team. I think that the story about the Newman Rhodes debacle, the way the season has ended, I think that Mike Zimmer is probably going to impart some kind of some words about how I'm going to throw the rest of the season out of the window and I'm going to use this game to evaluate, or something like that, right? I think that the team is going to be very like, our job is to win games, so we're going to win this game, even though it doesn't, really matter in the grand scheme of things.
You know what your problem is, team, is you lack discipline.
What's that? Is that South Park?
Yeah, when Randy decides that he's an alcoholic and Stan's taking martial arts classes for the first time, so he's like way too serious about him. Stan, I'm very sick. No. I don't know. It doesn't really matter who wins this game. None of this matters.
Cosmically, we're all gonna die.
Even Princess Leia dies.
Oh. Let's say like I can't believe you said that. That was offensive. It was more like, I've been reminded again.
No, it's so sad. Even George Michael dies on Christmas. Ah.
That was crazy. Like, I'm just checking Twitter on Christmas. Terrible idea. Never do it. And another person
like you could help yourself. Well, and then
right.
I was like, all right, George Michael. I mean, and I even remember thinking to myself the day after Christmas, I was like, well, I did see that report that said that Carrie Fisher was in stable condition after being hospitalized after that heart attack. So, phew.
Yeah, dodged a bullet. Oh no.
Well, now she's up there with all her Alderaan homies.
Well, yeah, I guess. She was real, they weren't. So there's a difference.
No, Princess Leia wasn't real. Carrie Fisher was real.
That's what I mean. She was real. Carrie Fisher.
But I started the segment by being Princess Leia.
Okay, sure.
I was trying to put a bow on it, but
I screwed that up. Anyway, did you see that Cinnabon tweet that they deleted?
No. Oh my gosh! Is there a GIF? Is there a Photoshop involved?
Well, I mean, no. Okay, so they have a picture of Princess Leia that they drew in like cinnamon powder, right? It's just like a powder drawing of Princess Leia, and then they put a Cinnabon. Sorry, it's branded, so it's a Cinnabon as like the bun to her hair, and then it was actually really innocuous. It was like, "Rip Carrie Fisher, you'll always have the best buns in the galaxy," and I thought, and it's a really nice drawing.
That's
I thought
cute.
Actually,
and
that
like
was
that,
nice.
That kind of finger drawing is not like you really only get like one bite at the apple. If you screw something up, you kind of have to like do the Buddhist sand drawing thing and like wipe it out and start all over. Like there's no cinnamon eraser. So I mean that represents like some effort and talent. It's not. I wouldn't call that necessarily disrespectful. I imagine Twitter.
I don't
disagreed.
think it was disrespectful at all. I thought it was really nice.
No. Twitter did not
then
share.
They deleted it. I assume they got a bunch of like, maybe not even that many. I assume they got some angry tweets in response. It's not like the time Dunkin' Donuts replaced the torches of the Liverpool logo with Dunkin' Donuts coffee.
Oh yeah, with cups of coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, like that was like Princess Leia's buns do not commemorate like the tragic death of like thousands of people. Like there's a huge difference. That was lighthearted and cute, and I thought it was nice. But wow. I guess they deleted it.
There you go. Don't you wish we could just like hit delete on this whole season and start over?
Yeah, I mean, what like the trendy thing to do is just to hate 2016 in general, and I don't see a reason to buck that trend. 2016 was trash.
It was, but I think all those people are complaining about 2016 with the unspoken expectation that 2017 will be better. And I mean,
in many ways, 2017 will be worse, especially for people who thought 2016 was trash because of the election. Wait till you find out what 2017 has in store about that.
There's plenty of celebrities left. You think all the good celebrities are dead now? Give it another year.
Okay, I will say this though. So a lot of people are like, 2016 was awful because all these celebrities died. And a bunch of people are like, well, people die every year. 2017, celebrities are going to continue to die. I think this year was genuinely worse. I think people noticed a lot of celebrity deaths in 2014, a lot of celebrity deaths in 2016. But the 2014 deaths were like John Ritter, which sad. I don't want to that was sad. But, and in fairness, Johnny Cash, super sad. I think he was 2014. But I mean, Prince and David Bowie.
That's true. And Zsa Zsa Gabor finally.
Wasn't she like a constant? So for listeners who are unaware, this is going to be a huge turn from the deaths are sad narrative that we've been spinning here on Norse Code. But Dusty and James have a death pool.
We don't have a death pool. James has a death pool. I merely play in it, and I got invited to the League of Champions after I won last year's death pool. So yes, we participate.
From my understanding,
in this.
Zsa Zsa Gabor has been like a first round pick in this death pool every year.
By me. This is my fourth year in a row picking Zsa Zsa Gabor. Although this year, like it's became such a joke in the first 3 years that I was able to still snag her as my last pick, and part of it helped. Like, so the scoring system is 100 minus the person's age at death. So Zsa Zsa Gabor, being 99 years old, was only worth 1 point this year, and strategically a terrible choice. But I couldn't. After all the misery, I was really like concerned that she would live on like 2 more years. And I would have to deal with the specter of negative points for picking her, because at this point I have no choice but to, stick with Zsa. 2.5 years ago, they took her foot from infection and didn't even tell her they had done it.
Oh my God! What?
Yeah, she's been bedridden.
Way more updated on Zsa Zsa Gabor news than I am.
Well, this is important to me, or was. Luckily, she can no longer torture future husbands. My favorite Zsa Zsa Gabor quote of all time: "I'm an excellent housekeeper. Whenever I divorce a man, I keep his house."
That's great. That sounds like something that would be misattributed to Marilyn Monroe. That's a very good quote.
Oh, she totally like assumed that mantle. Like in the 70s, she was briefly on like an advice show where she would kind of do her own little like televised advice column or whatever. Hilarious. Strongly recommend. But anyway, yeah, Zsa Zsa Gabor finally passed, along with, lots of other cultural icons. But like, I think in a larger way, we're approaching kind of an era where the cultural icons or like celebrities or whatever that do pass away are going to be resonant with both millennials and like Gen Xers / baby boomers. Like John Ritter was before a lot of people's time, and so like kids today don't even know who John Ritter was and have no reason to care unless they happen to watch, an old episode of Three's Company on YouTube. Whereas, some of the cultural impact, and I get that John Ritter and Prince and David Bowie are not the same, which I think is why you set it up that way. But I think we're going to see more, and I mean, who knows who it's going to be. I'm going to do my best to pick 10 of them in next year's death pool. But
by the way, my sense of time is awful. Both John Ritter and Johnny Cash died in 2003.
Woo!
I'm bad at this.
That's fine. I'm not good at a lot of things either, it turns out. Including keeping us on task.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, we were already talking about... We already gave up on the Bears game. So.
Well, yeah, given that, and just to, tie that one up neatly, given that everything is meaningless and all of our heroes will eventually die, and that this is an entirely meaningless, like, football game, as long as nobody gets injured, is there anything useful that we can take away from the end result, especially if the Vikings win? I think it would be good for the team to go out on a win.
It would be good for the team, like, emotionally to go out and win, but I think it's also really important to see how players like Nick Easton, who could potentially be part of the Vikings' future, do in this game. It'd be important to see how Jerick McKinnon does in the game. I think it's important to see how Xavier Rhodes responds to sort of what happened this week. It'll be important to see how Harrison Smith moves. There's a lot of important takeaways, I think, in this game that are beyond, winning is good, which I agree winning is good, and I think emotionally it'll be good for the Vikings to finish on a win, even if we can't measure, what that impact would be. Like, historically speaking, it hasn't mattered whether or not a team has ended the regular season with a win or a loss going into the next season. But
okay, but you really think that it'll make that much of a difference knowing that Harry Smith kind of can't run right now? I mean, whether he can or can't, he's got, 8 months before he has to do it again?
No, of course it does, because it speaks to, whether or not the injury that he has, if he's aggravating it, for example, is going to cause, longer term problems down the road, or whether or not, they were genuinely right and that he was actually recovering. And then also, he might, some of these small injuries end up having like permanent changes in like the way a player plays. Whether or not Harrison Smith gains his speed back, I think that's something that we can begin to see sort of in this game. So yeah, I think that there are important takeaways.
Indeed. I guess we'll see. I'm skeptical. I think that there is not a whole lot to be gleaned from this game in terms of next season's performance, unless I guess maybe we can put, Nick Easton out there, let Joe Berger have a rest. Or not. I guess we still need him to play right tackle, huh?
Right guard.
Right guard. Wow.
I guess. I mean, I don't know. Brandon Fusco kind of has to audition for his job. There's that. I don't know. Brandon Fusco's probably going to get cut after the end of the season, but he'll probably want to put out good tape this year.
So a good game for him, win or lose, would be crucial to him getting paid down the line.
Yeah, probably as a backup somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. We have a few mailbag questions. James put out a couple of pleas for questions to distract us from the Packers game, but I think we did a pretty decent job of. Well, actually, the Vikings did a decent job of setting us up with enough nonsense to talk about that we were able to distract ourselves with something shiny. Charismatic at HypeSolo1253 on Twitter writes in, do you think the team should package Sharif Floyd in a future pick for a good offensive tackle, or just try and get some luck through the draft?
This is related to another question that we got near the end of our mailbag call about how would you fix the offensive line. I don't think that you should trade Sharif Floyd. I want to see how he plays out through this final, because he's got the option year. I want to see how he plays through the final option year. If he plays a full season, then you have the ability to extend him. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL when he's healthy. And that's really valuable for the same reason that an offensive tackle is valuable. I think instead, the Vikings should try a couple of shots in free agency. If Andrew Whitworth doesn't work out and he would only be a 1 year, he's 35 or 36. But that would give you a shot at left tackle without having to spend a first round pick that you don't have. So you could get one, the year after while still having a pretty good offensive line. I think that you should keep Sharif Floyd because I think that he provides a lot. And Tom Johnson's getting pretty old, so it's not like you've got a huge stable of defensive tackles that you can rely on that'll perform at the same level. I think you could probably get a right tackle, in the second or third round of the draft. There's probably a couple of them, even though this is supposed to be a pretty weak draft for them. So yeah.
So I'm just pulling in Arif, writing a mildly funny tweet instead of paying attention to my podcast.
Classic Dusty Arif.
Well then let's go to the rest of the question next from Troy Podol at tpodol1. Missing a subject. The inferred I would love a sensible, achievable scenario for Vikings offseason offensive line fix.
Yeah, so I think in this case, it's to sign a left tackle in free agency. It's to draft a right tackle in the second round. And then either, you could take a shot at someone like TJ Lang at the right guard spot, or you could, draft another guard in the third round and have this, big competition between, whether or not Mike Harris is healthy, probably not, between, which guards you have on the roster, players like Jeremiah Searles, who, for a second did play guard in Boone's stead during an injury, or, Nick Easton might be able to play guard, or Joe Berger might be able to play guard or whatever. And, a couple of late round guards or something like that. So, I think that, picking a lot of players at the right guard spot is probably a good idea. Probably get another center. I like Nick Easton, but he has played pretty poorly in the last couple of games. And so, getting more competition at the center spot, because, Joe Berger's old too. And I think that this is, that kind of year where you have to exit camp with 10 players on the offensive line. And so I think that you need to enter camp with 13 or 14.
Well, so listening between the lines, I don't see a whole lot of interest in trading or signing free agents. Is that because it's not possible, because it would be too expensive, or is that just something that's
typically, I don't
dark.
like projecting free agent signings because we've been pretty convinced that there's the possibility of a bunch of free agent signings. Players like Michael Johnson, who thankfully the Vikings did not end up signing, and Clint Bowling, who has been not great. He's been average. It would have been nice if the Vikings had signed him. But there's been that kind of presumption that the Vikings, when the Vikings fan base gets fixated on a player, it hasn't worked out, right? And so,
well, no, but
I don't want to focus on it too much, but I do think that the free agent market at guard is fine. The free agent market at tackle is really poor. Andrew Whitworth, that's kind of it. Maybe Riley Reif, who's played both right and left tackle. He's having a pretty bad year, but he had a pretty good year before this year. And again, he can play both. And so I'm okay with it. It's just I don't think that there's that many options. And when there's not that many options, you can't really be okay with a target because you don't have a backup plan.
So the issue is not that you would have necessarily an issue with trading. It's that the pool is so thin that you don't want to get married to one or two choices and then have it not work out.
Yeah, and the Vikings by all means should make a run at Andrew Whitworth, or from a trade perspective, Joe Thomas, who's actually younger, and that's fine. And if it's Sharif Floyd for Joe Thomas, I'm probably okay with that. But I think that Sharif Floyd in a package for a first round pick, I don't know. I don't like the idea of trading because I think that the team is really good at the top end, but doesn't have a ton of depth. And so when you get rid of players, you really expose that lack of depth. I think the only place that they really have depth is at cornerback, and I don't really trust, I like Mac Alexander a lot, but I kind of don't trust him right now. I want him to play better. And I don't trust Trey Waynes, and I didn't like him, as a player, as an investment for the Vikings, coming in. And so I don't trust either of those two guys. So I think there's depth at cornerback, but, especially with Terrence Newman and Captain Munderland hitting free agency, I don't know if even the place where they have a ton of depth is someone where you want to trade. Maybe you could trade Justin Tratto. That's the only place I can see, somewhere where the Vikings actually have depth and a tradable asset without hurting the Vikings too much. And that's about it. And I don't know that any team would give up assets for him, even though I think that he's probably worth assets. So the only players worth trading are players I really don't want to trade away, except for an elite player like Joe Thomas, who probably has 3 more years in him or something like that. Because the trade market's thin. And the free agency market is also thin. And so it's just not that many options. But hey, if the ideal setup is you sign Andrew Whitworth at left tackle, you've got a year to get a first round pick. You sign TJ Lang at right guard. You draft a right tackle. You draft, a center and a guard for long-term backups. And that's kind of your resource allocation along the offensive line. And I think the offensive line would get a lot better, even if it's full of players who haven't played with each other before.
Oh, sorry. I was too busy sitting there with my glasses off, massaging the bridge of my nose after you talked about how DJ Clemmings is still part of the plan.
It's good to have bodies. I don't see him making it out of camp, I guess.
I think his body makes a compelling counter-argument.
I did say draft a right tackle, so there's a replacement for him.
But that sounds to me like a pretty hardy competition.
No, you draft him in the second round. You draft a second rounder at a position of need if you think you're going to start the second rounder. You can draft second rounders in non-positions of need, like Mackenzie Alexander. You're not necessarily going to start them. But if it's at a position of need, you're probably going to start them. TJ Clemmings should compete for a spot, just like all these other undrafted free agents that could probably beat him out.
Zing. Well said.
Vikings ruined him, man. I thought it was a good pick. I think that you can't prove to me that it was a bad pick just because I think the Vikings ruined him and embedded bad habits and embedded panic into his play.
Is this
I think that if he was allowed to develop, he would have been, fine.
A case of failure to football thrive?
No, it's more like thrown into the fire too early or whatever that metaphor would be. You're just thrown in too early, and then when you get thrown in too early, panic becomes part of your play.
I actually, that happened to me in high school band. My
You're the TJ Clemmings of whatever instrument.
I was the TJ Clemmings of the trombone section. And the worst part is that our band director, I was showing, improvement, like fairly rapid improvement for somebody who had just picked up the instrument like in high school. And so my junior year, they just like shipped me off to the symphonic band with all the people who had been playing their instruments since like elementary school. And not only did I like survive the audition, but they made me like second chair instead of third. And I was not good enough to be second chair. And
well, it's a good thing trombone is a nice and quiet instrument and you can hide all your mistakes.
Actually, no. The only place I shone was marching band. Because if you don't really know the notes, you can just play louder and it'll be fine. Like you don't have to be that technical in marching band, and it's hard work. I could just play loud. It was very simple, like rhythms and notes and stuff. Jazz band, nightmare. Symphonic band, total nightmare, because everyone around me knew that I was the least qualified trombone player there, especially the third chair trombone players.
Brutal.
I'm sorry, guys. I don't know why they felt they needed me. Maybe because they felt like I had leadership qualities that were yet untapped. But I know exactly where poor TJ is coming from. I developed a lot of bad habits just trying to keep up with the complexity of the music that I had to read. You take little shortcuts with your technique, and eventually you come out a year later with really terrible habits. Then your band director comes up to you during senior year and is like, "I wish I had never done that."
Oh.
Aww.
Dusty Clemmings.
No. Please no.
Are there any other mailbag questions?
Oh yes. Something about a fire pit. Judd Zolgad's Hoodie has a couple of great off-topic questions. First, best and worst movie of 2016.
I don't know, man. I didn't watch that many movies. I'm sorry. I don't really have an answer for this.
Rogue One is my answer to both.
Oh, okay. I cannot contest this because I still haven't watched it.
I don't know. It's hard not to enjoy, but I found a way.
That's impressive. That meets the level of cynicism that we strive for on Norse Code.
That I strive for. You, for some reason, still insist upon believing in the good of people like TJ Clemmings.
No. Believe in the good that could have been. He's bad. He's irreparably bad.
All right. Brie cheese on a steak. Fair or foul?
This sounds like a question you're more qualified to answer because I think you're more imaginative when it comes to these sorts of things, but my immediate impression is foul.
Mine too. I think you can do butter, or you can do blue cheese.
Butter's great.
Like a really like stanky blue cheese, or even better, Humboldt Fog, which is like a blue goat cheese.
But that sounds pretty good.
Like brie cheese is like halfway between butter and like sour cheese flavor, which is just like, I mean, if you're gonna have half measures like that, just eat the steak. If a steak needs brie cheese on it to be good, it's probably not a good steak.
Yeah, all right. Next question.
Okay, one more from Hoodie. How far along in a relationship is it okay to fart in front of your girlfriend or a significant other? 2 months? 4 months? Question marks.
You just got to read the room. You just got to figure out what kind of relationship you're in. For some people, it could be 2 months. For some people, it's not until you're married. Like it's a minefield. You just got to read it. You just have to know what you're dealing with. And sometimes you won't know until it happens. So you always have to have like an accidental apology ready too.
So my belief is that the amount of time you should wait is inversely related to your belief that this is like a real and lasting, potentially marriage quality relationship. Like if you meet a girl and in a month or two, you feel like she might be the one, like you guys are like really killing it, then I would fart in front of her as soon as possible. Because if she can't live with that, then it's probably never going to work. And you should know sooner than later so that you can bail.
Can you imagine that breakup speech, though? Like, look, I tested the waters. It's not working out. What do you mean you tested the waters? We haven't lived together. Well, in a sense, we have. What are you talking about? Look, I farted in front of you and you freaked out. We're through.
No, that's totally a fair conversation to have.
Wait, that's ridiculous. Can you imagine being on the other end of that?
Okay, so that's your opportunity to backtrack and be like, if I had known that I was being, like, the entire, like, future of our relationship was being judged on my fart freak out, I maybe wouldn't have freaked out so much. And then that presents an opening
then
for...
you're just asking for disingenuous reactions to continue this husk of a relationship, evidently.
Well, no. You
can't be like, well, if I had known that, like, this didn't work, then I would have made it work. Like, obviously.
Well, no, that's where you sardonically ask, well, how long should I have waited then? 2 months? 4 months?
And then they would like stumble in and be like, case in point. Out,
be like, I was,
right?
And no, then that's when you say, I only farted in front of you because I felt comfortable, and that's why it slipped out.
It's true love, really. Anyway, bye.
Exactly. No, but that's not necessarily goodbye. Like, I mean, you tell them you're breaking up, but you don't necessarily have to like break up with them. Like if they're amenable to, smelling the inside of your butt every now and then maybe the relationship can be salvaged. But I don't know, maybe I just have less tolerance for people who like would freak out about that sort of thing. I mean, I know they're out there. I know that is a largish subset of the population, but I think that if you are less committed to the relationship, or if it's more like if the relationship feels more like hunting a deer than like running up to your dog when you get home, like if it's like you're still in the tiptoeing around phase, just don't fart ever. And you kind of let things happen that way. But if you really...
According to Von Miller, never farting is unhealthy for you. According to doctors, that's actually not true.
Yeah, I'm with Von Miller on this one. He's a nerd. He loves the National Geographic YouTube channel, and he wears glasses. 2 things that I have in common with him.
Yeah, okay, sure. Next question.
All right. We answered that one already. This is a question that you are not qualified to answer, so I won't bother. Drunken Vike at Drunken Vike writes, in a more philosophical and existential sense, why?
Either because, there is no God and all life is meaningless, or because there's a God and he hates you specifically.
I mean, I interpreted the question to be like, why do anything?
Yeah, okay. I don't see how my answer is like irrelevant. Like, God hates you, now do stuff to spite him.
Well, I believe there is a best-selling book that details some of the efforts of people who have attempted that in the past.
You're referencing something. I have no idea what you're referencing.
The Old Testament.
Oh, is everybody doing things out of spite?
Not everybody, but there are definitely multiple chapters about not crossing God.
Worked out though, right? I assume it worked out. Next question.
I mean, not if you're a Vikings fan.
I assume it worked out. Next question.
I actually think that's it. Oh no, one from CT at the 16643. Do you ever play bar trivia? And if so, do you have any tips?
I have no tips. Don't bring your phone out. I know you could probably hide it from the people who would like enforce the no phone rule and stuff like that, but that's just as boorish.
What are your thoughts on tattling on people who are cheating with their phones? And using your phone is cheating. Just to be clear.
Totally cheating. Okay, so my issue is that I'm from Minnesota. So I'm like very uncomfortable with all kinds of like this kind of conflict. So
probably not. I think it's predicated on the value of the eventual prize. Like if you're
Oh, that's true.
If you're in the final Jeopardy round, like
if someone else does it, I am not judging that person. They were totally in the right to tattle, right? But if I do it and then they shoot me a look, I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe I did that. I'm sorry. Should I apologize? Damn.
Okay, how about this? How about you're on a team of 4 people and you're all talking about an answer to a question, like trying to tease it out like a normal person would, but then somebody breaks out their phone. Do you tell them to stop?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this isn't even like because I'm on a podcast and people are listening to me and I'm just saying the right thing, because obviously I have not done that on the podcast before. But no, it's just like I don't know. It kind of like steals it from me. Okay, so part of the reason I do bar trivia is because I like to feel smart, and I don't feel smart if someone's looking up the answer on the phone.
Like I know exactly. I'm smart. I'm not as smart as the Google, but I'm pretty smart.
Right? Well, obviously we're going to lose to the phone. That's not. We're not testing that.
I actually.
Also, like, I don't know if I feel worse that the phone confirmed it and no one trusted me, or if the phone told me I was wrong and I have immediate, like, feedback that I was wrong. Instead of, like, because in bar trivia, like, we're all in this. Like, I don't care if we argued and you disagreed. We eventually agreed that this was the answer, and now you share part of the blame for not putting forth a good enough argument. So we're all in this. But if the phone comes out and I'm wrong, now we're not all in this. They didn't, like, make this argument. You know?
Exactly. Well, and that's part of the fun of bar trivia is if you end up in, like, 3rd or 4th place or horror of horrors not placing at all, then the, like, debrief is almost as much fun as the actual trivia playing, because then you get to point fingers and have a good old-fashioned Mexican standoff.
Yes, exactly. I guess I do have a tip. In my experience, just like with standardized multiple choice tests, your first instinct is often correct in that you should have some preponderance of evidence or preponderance of, like, good argumentation before you go away from your first instinct.
Yes.
So that is an actual tip.
If somebody comes up and is like, whatever answer, blah, 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 Winston Churchill, and no one else can come up with a compelling reason why it's not Winston Churchill should probably be your answer.
Yeah, and it's not like this rule hasn't been wrong for me in the past, sometimes catastrophically so in the context of bar trivia, but for the most part, it has been true.
That's part of the fun. Other common suggestions, don't get too drunk until you win. Always be like I don't, depending on the, like, if it's NTN trivia, good luck. But if it's a less organized form of bar trivia where you have to, like, submit answers to a proctor or whatever, like on paper, if there isn't anyone going around picking up the cards, it is to your advantage to, submit yours earlier than later. So have a team member ready, answer quickly, and be good test takers. Also, there might be some value in like when it's like figure out time for a question, to have a team member just like shout the trigger words for voice searches on iPhone and Android, so that as many people's as possible's phones like spend time like activating their voice search so people can't search for stuff on their phones. Just be like, okay, or hey, sir. Like, just try to slow everyone down who's cheating, because I guarantee you nearly everyone
here's
around.
Caribou. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, exactly. Just slow down the cheating, because they will be there. And although proctors are generally pretty good about kicking people out who cheat with their phones, there will always be that team of like 3 hot girls and 1 nerd that always seems to win. And I think we all know why.
All right. So that's been Norse Code.
Yes, it has.
Before the Bears game, I will be on 1500 ESPN. Want to get that plug out there.
Ooh, time and date? Probably right before the game?
Yeah, 10:20 right before the game.
Sweet. So tune in. Wait, 10:20?
10:20 Central Time.
So an hour and 40 minutes before the game.
Yeah, I will be on 1500 ESPN with Doogie, Darren Wolfson.
Ooh, that'll be fun. So don't miss that. And whatever Arif chooses to write in the intervening week. after this week, we're probably going to soften up our schedule a little bit and go down to, like one episode a week, probably? Functionally none until the draft? No, that's not true.
Yeah. No, we're going to do one episode a week again.
Yeah, this was a hard enough show to fill 2 hours with. I can't imagine what we'll talk about when there isn't even a meaningless game to engage.
We'll probably talk about the playoffs for a second, make some bad bets.
Go Seahawks.
Yay.
Boo Dolphins. Boo.
Boo.
And until next week, spoons out. We'll see you then.
Norse Code is the official podcast of the Daily Norseman SB Nation blog and is produced with cooperation from Pompous Jerk Productions. Pompous Jerk Productions. Attitude with attitude. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of their contributors and do not reflect official positions of the Minnesota Vikings, SB Nation, the Daily Norseman staff, or PJP. No information in this podcast should be construed as gambling advice. Please obey all local gaming laws.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.